Welcome, Tammy, to the podcast.
Happy to be here, Christine.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. You have a really dynamic story to tell. You have a lot of really fantastic atmosphere about you. And so I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. Where in the world are you tuning in from, Tammy?
I'm tuning in from the Berkshires in Massachusetts. I originally hailed from Needham, Massachusetts, which is a little town 20 minutes outside of Boston.
Okay.
Mhm.
Excellent. Excellent. So it looks to me, I'm looking at your window there. It looks like it's a nice warm day.
It is
Excellent.
beautiful here this time of year. Not so
Oh,
much in the
good.
winter, but beautiful now.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, it's rainy in Canada today, so or well, not in all of Canada, of course. In Saskatchewan, it is rainy, so I'm enjoying a little bit of an in day. I'm curious, Tammy, what brings you to the podcast? What brings you to t talking with us today? And who is Tammy?
I absolutely love your platform of really combining personal stories with transformation. And in essence, really that's been my journey personally and professionally. So I really wanted to be able to share my journey, how I found out what I found out, some of the pitfalls, and really learn from yours as well. I've been inspired by listening to you and hearing about your book and your process and your transformation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really am honored by that. Okay, well, I mean, share with us. Let us know what was your story that brought you to where you are today?
So much. I would have thought it was a different story had I met you even 20 years ago or 15 years ago. But the more I live, the more I understand that I have been on a journey from the get-go. I know in your questions that you'd originally sent, it was what was the adversity and when did that happen? I would say very clearly now I was born into adversity. And it took me a long time to own that because growing up in the town that I did and the privilege that I've experienced, that was difficult to say because it all looked good. But you didn't have to look very far under the hood to know that it wasn't. I was born to uneducated parents. My dad was a business owner and was successful for a little while. But he had significant history of abuse and neglect and was Vietnam and is a Vietnam vet with significant substance issues. So I grew up in an atmosphere where I'm really swimming in and breathing in a real sense of lack of safety, of being seen and of being met. And it's taken me in a lot of ways decades to claw out of that.
Okay. Okay. So at a young age, you come into this world, and it sounds like mainly around your father and his experiences that he really experienced a lot of substance issues, abuse, difficulty, and so he might not have known, how to provide you that safety and those comforts that I'm sure he wanted to provide you, but maybe didn't know. Would you say that that's accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I know, I think more than anyone that he did the absolute best that he could. And given what he was dealing with, the tools that he had, he really couldn't. And I know enough now to know he, was dealing with PTSD. My mother was also, codependent and lost in her own survival. So when parents are working just to survive, kids don't thrive,
Fine.
and
So
that
what
was
did
me.
that teach you about life and about the world that is that may have impacted you both positively and negatively as you
Mhm.
moved into the future?
I would say I definitely had these layers of and interjects of these negative beliefs about myself and deep shame. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. And that was a shadow and a cloud that followed me out of everywhere. And as you can imagine, had an impact on everything, whether it be school performance, relationships, choosing people who didn't treat me well, really
Mm,
underachieving in so many ways. Um,
okay.
but it also like right out the gate, I was so motivated to get out, you know? And so
Mm.
even though I would flail and I would fail, I was always motivated to get out of the house, get out of the state, um, to be myself, whatever that was, and to separate from what was making me ill.
Wow. Okay. So you had a strong drive. Do you know where may have come from, that strong drive to move forward, despite some of the difficulties that you felt?
I think a lot of it I was born with, quite honestly. When I think about, I have a sibling who's 3 years younger than me, and I think about how we both came into this world. And there's a story in my family of origin that my mother likes to tell that she would chase me around the house for a hug, and that's me. Don't fence me in, don't trap me, don't jail me. I just need to be free. So
Okay.
I think that was kind of in me, and I also. I think I knew intrinsically that if I allowed that closeness, that it would drown me in a lot of ways. And so, in the way that the family system was and the enmeshment, and I think that's honestly something I was born with. I have an innate ability to be pulled by source or by spirit and just be led by that. And I think that that's been there all along.
Okay. Wow.
Mhm.
That's extraordinary. This gift that was given to you from such a young age, really from like you say, from inception, this
Mhm.
feeling of needing to be free. I heard you say, this core value really is freedom for you.
Mhm.
You will not be entrapped, and so you really had this feeling, and so right away, right out the gate, you said, "Hey, you know what? I'm getting out of here, getting out of the state. I'm getting out of the house. I'm making something out of myself." And you flailed, as you said,
Failed and
and you
failed.
fell. It failed, flailed and failed, and you got back up again. And so, tell us what happened next.
I did struggle through my teens and 20s to find my footing, and landed up in New York City and went to graduate school. And looking back, I didn't know it, but all along I was healing what was within. I ended up really, my first love was working in trauma and working in domestic violence and survivors of sexual assault. And from there, I realized, well, I can't do that work without understanding addiction and recovery and all of that. So that led me there. And lo and behold, well, isn't that everything that the foundation of my issues in my family of origin for decades and generations was really, it really brought me there. And I didn't know that I was finding my own healing journey, my own undoing, my
Mhm.
own understanding of where that intergenerational stuff was going to stop, you know?
Mm. Yeah, becoming that generational breaker.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You got it.
Wow, that is a beautiful story. And so, I'm curious about two things. What drew you to helping people with sexual assault in the first place? Because it's interesting. You've got this feeling of freedom. I need to get out of here, and then helping became the one of the first things you did. And so, I'm curious what brought you to that. And then the second curiosity that I have here is that what you found when you began to dig into the addictions and those sorts of things and how that helped you.
hmm So I think I was led from a very young age. I was in my not even teens when I wanted to be a therapist. And
Wow.
I don't, again, like that was something that was just pulled. It was a knowing I was just kind of born with. And so I followed that. In a way, I think it was probably my, inner fantasy or wish to be rescued and helped myself when there was no one there for me.
Wow.
Um, and
Okay.
then and then the women's issues, so to speak, feminist, domestic violence, sexual assault, like that place was near and dear to my heart in some ways. I I think in the way that my mother parented, certainly, and being raised in the Catholic Church and questioning, like, things didn't seem right to me, and I would
Okay.
question a lot. And so I think the foundation of the questioning and the feminist, this isn't right, justice kind of thing led me to really wanting to help women. And now, if we look at my childhood, that probably innate desire when I was younger to help or rescue my mother in a lot of ways. Hmm.
Okay. hmm
Yeah.
hmm Wow. Wow. What an awareness there that you have.
Well, now maybe, but certainly then it was just like, oh, this is what I want to do. And now
Can I
looking
give it
back,
a
I can
go?
see how it all fits together. It all came out of the adversity really, and wanting others not to suffer. It's not something, it's innate to being a human, and um you know this from your own story. There's so many gifts in that and so many opportunities. And I don't want people to miss the opportunities or to suffer in silence and think that's, well, just how it has to be.
hmm Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So you moved into mental health and addictions,
Right.
and and that would have been wildly rewarding, especially because, it taught you a lot about your own history. And something that you said that I thought was so beautiful is you said there was a part of you when you started therapy that wanted to be saved and helped too,
Hmm.
and that drove you into helping. And I think that deserves a moment of honoring, because so many of the helping professionals that we have in this world, are absolutely people who have at one point really needed to be saved and helped. And I think that that's a quality that, has mixed reviews. Kind of like, oh, how can I be helped by this person who needs to be helped? But what the beauty of it is that I think helping professionals that have gone through wild bouts of adversity, they are a little bit ahead of the person who's searching for the help. Not the top of the mountain crest, but just a little bit ahead. And I think that you can learn so much from a person who is a little bit ahead of you, as opposed to someone who's standing up, this golden god of like, I've learned everything.
Yeah.
And so, that's what I love about the helping professionals, and the industry in general, is that we get real life accounts of what it is to need help because it's still fresh in those helping professional minds. And they're able to give you kind of real life, real time experiences that they remember clearly. And so, do you identify with that as a helping professional?
I do in a way, and I see it a little differently in that
Please.
I think that, right, I think overall what I've really learned, the morsel of the piece that I want people to take away from this conversation, from any bit of work that I do, is that you have everything that's inside of you. And for some reason, I do believe I was born with knowing that voice, and things didn't make sense, and I would question them because I had this kind of inner knowing. And so I whether I'm further along in my journey or not, my journey is so specific to me, even though I'm an adult child of an alcoholic or adult child of trauma survivors who haven't done their work. I think there's things that are overlap, but still mine is quite unique. But I think what's exactly the same is that we have everything we need inside of us. And so I I think what I do mostly more than anything is guide people back to self and back to
Okay.
that inner knowing,
hmm hmm
no matter what my journey's been, I'm hardly an expert in me even. So
I
certainly not an expert in you, and I will not give advice, but I do want you to find that inner knowing inside of you because that's everything.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. This is the meat here. So here's the meat and potatoes of what it is that you teach and what it is that you help people find. Can you
Yeah.
say more about this inner knowing, about how to access it? and
Mhm.
what it can offer each individual person. You know, you might have someone listening now, I'm thinking, who might be saying, well, that's good for her. She was born with it. I don't have an inner knowing. What would you
Mhm.
say to that person?
Ah, I love that question. Um, we are all born with an inner knowing, and the layers of experience that are put upon us from birth on obscures that. So it can be trauma and something really big or not. It can just be opinions of others. It can be our culture. And we then develop these ideas of what or who we are, or that we have to be a certain way because the culture calls for it, or because my mother wanted me to be thin, or I mean, any of those things.
Yeah, pick your
And
poison.
right. And being in this culture, we're taught really that everything exists from the neck up. We're very cognitive. And what I learned in my own journey, professionally and personally, is that most of what we need to transform, to understand, in quotes, but really viscerally, is in our bodies. And so my suggestion and my answer is if we clear out the noise a bit, the different parts of us that might be anxious or scared or judgment um, or the one that pushes the pain away and locks it in a box or drinks it away or has sex in a way, all of those things. If we work with those symptoms or parts a little bit and they start to step back, what's left is the clarity and the understanding and that inner knowing. We all have that. Some people call it soul.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
that's uncomfortable for you, you can
Mhm.
call it spirit, you can call it self, but we're all connected to everyone and everything. And the way to do that is to connect with that self inside of us. Strangely, though, we also find a way to connect and we can find that inner knowing through connection with others. I'm sure you've had those moments of like, whoa,
Mhm.
this is it right here. What's happening between me and you? This is everything. And that's a way to access it too, at least to find it initially. Other people might do breath work um, or sound baths or walking in the woods, connection to nature or other things to find that place.
Mm. Okay. Okay. So really what I'm hearing is there's a presence that is necessary for that connection. So kind of
Mhm.
getting out of your head, out of the future and the past, and instead in more of like a present moment. I'm also hearing that the answers are inside our body, not our minds. And so that we can overthink and we can cram and we can write lists of pros and cons and we can do all those things. But what's really going to give us that answer is that internal knowing, that body presence that requires getting quiet.
Mhm.
Mm,
Absolutely. Hmm. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when you are in a place of you feel like you're very cognitive, you're very in your head, what is one of the first things that you do to try to access that inner knowing?
I can drop in, take a moment, drop into that third eye space. Some might call it meditation. And that can bring me there. I have the other practices like movement, nature, getting in the salt water, always an option for me. But for different folks and different biologies, it can look very different. Some people might be a cold plunge or a long restorative hug or yoga, meditation, reading,
Mm. Hmm.
connecting deeply with a best friend. Um, it can vary, I guess, Reiki, other energy healings. Uh,
Right. Right. And you
but
said
it's
it's
really,
unique to each folk.
I think so. Yeah,
Hmm.
I do.
Hmm. For you, it sounds like baths are a great one.
Exactly. Water always.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
I'm with you on the water. I'm a Pisces myself, so yeah, I
Hmm.
definitely understand. So, okay, that is really special. So, every person has their unique way of dropping in that is kind of specific to them. So, do you encourage people that you speak with to find whatever it is theirs is. Like it could be knitting, it could be, like you say, reading a book, connecting with a friend, to find theirs and to practice it in those moments where they really need an answer, that they might know it by, being in a flow state. By
Right.
being in this kind of time and space seems to fade away.
Mhm.
20 minutes could go by like that, or it could feel like, forever, but in a beautiful way. Would you encourage people to find that space in whatever their unique way is?
Yeah, absolutely. And not just when they're looking for answers, but
Hmm.
practice those things so that when you're looking for the answers, it's easy to find that space.
Okay.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Yeah.
It does. It
Uh-huh.
does. And I heard
Mhm.
you say drop in. And I really
Mhm.
liked that because it visually it takes you away from that headspace and lets you drop in. Even though the drop in for you was dropping into the third eye, it was
Mhm.
dropping away from the mind, even though location wise it's, in the same spot. But I loved how you said drop in and access that third eye space. And so dropping into the moment, dropping into the body, dropping into the inner knowing
Mhm.
can be
Mhm.
really, or is really the main message that you want to get out to folks, as a practice, as something that becomes kind of second nature, so that when you need those answers, they're easy to access.
Exactly. And really, honestly, the portal doesn't have to be that either, because that's oftentimes secondary. I think frustration can really come in when, well, I can't get there, or, I'm too distracted by X, Y, or Z, or I'm too stressed, or whatever the thing is. And the portal to that place is actually the thing that's keeping you awake at night, or the anxiety, or the discomfort, or the fear. Meaning, um, instead of running to or going straight for the practice that will get you in flow, if we turn to that fear or to that anxiety or to that stressor and get curious about that, there's a strange thing that happens. You would think by shining light on it and getting closer to it, your stress would increase, or the symptoms would increase, or you'd be more uncomfortable. In fact, the opposite's true. As you face it and get curious about it and make connection with it, the discomfort decreases, and then you can access that place of flow that you're talking about more easily.
Okay.
Mhm.
That is such an important note here that we have to just pause on. So in the process of, wanting to no longer feel pain, wanting to no longer feel discomfort, etc., you are not advising the spiritual bypass of saying like, you know what, I don't want to feel this. And so I'm going to meditate. You
Yes,
are
ma'am.
instead are saying, no, you got to turn towards it. You got to
Mhm.
spend a little time with it
Mhm.
and have no fear. It will not increase. It will instead dissipate. Maybe momentarily it could increase, really because of that fear that you're going to have to turn towards it.
Mhm.
But once you really shine light on it,
Mhm.
you are going to be able to have that diminish and then welcome a more flow state, a more parasympathetic state as a result, as opposed to, kind of, I don't want to feel this, so I'm going to meditate.
Right, right. We don't want to just band-aid it. What happens when we band-aid it? I'm sure you already know. The symptoms increase. But really the
Hmm.
symptoms are invitations, and they're like little toddlers calling us to do something and pay attention to them and give them what they need ultimately.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I just love
Thank you.
that. I think that was such an important addition. So for anyone listening, because we're all searching for, and I mean, how can we blame us as humans? We're all searching to move away from discomfort and towards pleasure and happiness, joy, relaxation. And so often, many listeners will go to things like podcasts when they're in an uncomfortable state. I just need to feel better. I don't want to feel this anymore. And so they've landed up on our conversation today just to find out that unfortunately, thank you for tuning in, listener. And maybe you've turned off the podcast already because you're thinking, oh, absolutely not. But what it is we're going to tune into this a little bit in order for that flow state to be welcomed, in order for that clarity to come.
100%. There's no
Mm.
way around it.
Yeah, yeah, isn't that the truth? There isn't. And I heard you say, drink it away or have sex away or whatever it is that we away our discomfort with. And it sounds like, full circle moment, right? I think
Right,
back to
right.
your parents and they did their best with what they could, as we said.
Yep.
That being said, in their pursuit of more relaxation and joy, they turned away from the pain in any way that they could.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And left me with these gifts,
Yes,
right?
yes, absolutely. Of
Every
being that
symptom's
cycle
an
breaker,
opportunity. It's an invitation.
an opportunity and an invitation, like little toddlers banging on the door and trying to get you to listen.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, okay. So I see this TEDx sign behind you. What is it that you usually speak to in your TEDx talks?
I've done one TEDx talk. It was last October, and I definitely
Congratulations.
want to do more. I just was speaking with a friend the other day. I want to be on stage more. I want to do more talks. What the TEDx talk was specifically about was about EMDR, eye movement desensitization and, and reprocessing therapy, which I was trained in years ago by the founder, about 30 years ago, by the founder, Dr. Francine Shapiro. And while my TEDx talk had to be just specifically about EMDR and staying on that topic, TED's very stringent on what you're able to say and the claims you're able to make. Um, I wanted to say so much more about it. I wanted it to be called time travel and trauma recovery, and how you can really, through the process of EMDR and some other modalities, change your nervous system in a way that it doesn't even know that that past happened. You'll have the memory, but you won't have the visceral reactions anymore.
Hmm. Well,
Mhm.
I mean, at the risk of us talking the next 2 hours, could you explain some of that in a nutshell? I'm interested.
I will try and be brief, yes. So trauma isn't stored in the body like typical memory. Typical memory will be wired in and connected to other experiences. But with trauma, it's so unique, at least for us. And just to be clear, that trauma is unique to each person. So you might have an experience and move on with your day, and it doesn't leave any imprint on you. I might have that very same experience and I'll have flashbacks and anxiety, and it might really have an impact on me because of where my resilience lies or doesn't lie. So, with that said, it's not stored like typical memory. It's stored in the body and it's not connected to other things. So, it will just pop up unbidden. So you'll see things like being frozen or shut down, or reliving patterns that existed, like I was reliving patterns that existed from my childhood. And you might have intrusive thoughts and nightmares and activation of your nervous system. So through certain modalities, and EMDR is one of them, you can go back, process that information, and release it out of your nervous system and tell another story. So, for example, when I worked with someone who experienced an assault in her teens or 20s, I think, we went back, processed it a bit, and she did this unbidden and undirected. It was beautiful. At one point, she said to me, I just pushed him off of me and ran out of the apartment. So her brain knows and remembers that she was assaulted. However, her nervous system is very attached to the story that she pushed him off and left, and she doesn't carry any of the negative impacts of what happened to her any longer in her body.
Wow. Powerful.
Yeah,
And that was
yeah, it
using
is.
EMDR and just regression therapy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay. Wow. Powerful. And so she walked away. She was able to rid some of those body sequences that had been plaguing for her for a long period of time, I assume.
Yeah, what's interesting is really where we went in initially was some discomfort with work, not discomfort with work, but frustration with work, that she was really upper limiting herself and her business wasn't taking off the way she wanted or needed to. And what's fascinating, at least for me, I hope your listeners find it fascinating too, is that is that the same exact feelings she was feeling around her work, which was powerlessness, frustration, fear, and where she felt in her body were all the same things she was feeling around that assault.
Wow. Yeah.
Hmm.
That is fascinating. It
Yeah.
truly is. It's amazing how our experiences become the transference into really all of these different places in life,
Mhm.
um, and can show up in simple things like your business. It can
Exactly.
show up in when you were young, you went through this experience, and then therefore now you have trouble with whatever it is, riding on airplanes, etc., and
Hmm.
how those can be connected, and
Hmm.
how, going back and utilizing, that style of therapy or other styles of therapy that fit for you can
Hmm.
be really helpful. I've heard such great things about EMDR. I've not trained in it yet, but
Hmm.
that's one of the top of the list because it seems to be a really effective therapy.
It is. I'm not sure how people both professionally and personally manage without those tools. After a while, I realized I used EMDR quite a bit, and I realized that it does also, like all therapies, have its limitations. So I blended in some internal family systems work in there, and it's so deep and so powerful. And getting into the body and working with those various parts and giving us space to drop into self and flow, it's remarkable.
It
Yeah.
is remarkable. And Tammy, your reference of trauma being in the body is also something that is remarkable because we hear that from gurus, we hear that from authors, we hear that from, the Gabor Mates, like all of the people out there that are training us on trauma is that we're finding it stored in the body and that this whole conversation has been around dropping into that body, turning towards our trauma, turning towards our emotions, dropping into the body and allowing a flow state. And so what I really hear in your work is that you work in body work.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
Mm,
And
absolutely.
whether you're deeply spiritual or not, it is rooted in that in a lot of ways. And
Absolutely.
um, whether it's your first experience with that connection with self and everything, or maybe you're already on that journey and it's something you're really familiar with, but it is a deeply embodied and spiritual practice and work. It's true.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Okay. So, for the listener listening who has gone through this experience, who has trauma stored, where would you recommend that they begin, that they start on their journey to healing?
Mhm. I think for a lot of people, it's where you're comfortable. If it's looking for an EMDR therapist, psychologytoday.com has a great way of sorting for EMDR therapies in your state, in your region, with your insurance. EMDRIA, which is the EMDR International Association, they also have a list online of folks you can look for. But maybe therapy is not for you. I would suggest even starting with, taking a moment, whatever symptom or invitation is showing up for you and getting curious. For me, I do a lot of that in the car when I'm on walks. I'll have conversation with the parts, whether it be a discomfort in my body that's been, calling me to pay attention or something emotional that's coming up. I'll have conversations with these. Sometimes not in my head. Sometimes walking on the beach doesn't matter. Maybe I'm
That's
singing,
okay. Yeah.
right?
It's
But
where we
I,
get a
but
lot
I,
of clarities when we speak out loud.
but I think if therapy isn't the space for you, that's great. Find a pen and a paper and talk to those parts through writing or do it in your head. Um, And I think you and I spoke a little bit about other ways of regulating and getting into our bodies and getting into that parasympathetic place. Um, and whatever those things are, they're great. They're great tools and opportunities for feeling better, and they're great band-aids. And if you want to get curious and go underneath that and really do some, more sustainable, deeper work, go for it.
Wow. Yes. Okay. All right. I love that. They're great band-aids. They're going to help you feel better. But,
Mhm.
if you want to get some clearing done, if you want to really, have some healing, then you're going to have to go a little deeper.
I think that's true.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you for saying that. Okay. Well, how can people connect with you and your work, Tammy?
I'm at tammyvalicenti.com. You can just search my name. Maybe it'll be in your show notes. And I think my email's through that. People can always text me, email me, call me. I'm really accessible. And if
Okay.
it's not with me and you want to do it with someone else, I can provide referrals as well. It's like the conversations I'm having on stage and with people like you, or because I want people to find what works for them. Um, and so keep looking. If one thing doesn't work, keep seeking.
Mm. Okay. Beautiful note to end off with. Thank you again so much for coming to the podcast, for sharing with us all of this information, and yeah, we're just deeply grateful to have you and hear all of your stories, as well as all of your tips and tricks.
Thank you so much, Christine.
Thank you.